Welcome to Real Life and Archetypes. My name is Marina. So, I want to talk about relationships and how it is connected to the hero. You'd think that there's nothing going on there, but it's actually completely related, the hero and relationships. And I wanted to make this video based on an interview that I watched with two former Navy SEALs, DJ and Cole. I can't remember the last names now, link below. But they did an interview a month ago that I just watched, and it was very interesting. So, as you know, I love always going into special forces and these guys. The main reason that I always say is because they represent the hero archetype in such a great way. And because of that, they're very interesting in the things, the things that they report, their experiences and what they learn. It's just a very good way to look at archetypes for me, okay? And for many other reasons. But so in this interview, what I found really interesting was related to relationships. So they were talking about, how they've had issues in relationships. So again, I just said these are guys that I find very interesting. In order to see archetypes, you're going to see them very clearly. They are the hero archetype, right? So the hero is a symbol that represents individuality, extreme individuality, okay? It's thinking in terms that we all have like a mission in life and it's very individual. And this, from the perspective of the hero archetype, what you need to become aware of is that you have a higher purpose for yourself, and then you're going to evolve from just worrying about yourselves to really integrating more into the world. That's one of the things that the hero needs to evolve into. That can be very challenging, always challenging from the perspective of the hero. But one of the things that the hero needs to resolve as you mature and evolve is relationships, because that is the biggest problem for the hero archetype. So, extreme individuality, your individuality now meets another individuality. So, that's opposing forces. That's what we call opposing forces. So, in relationships, we talk about the balance, equality, and things like that. Let me just explain this in terms of archetype because there are some nuances here. So, because equality, people think it's like, you split 50-50. That's not exactly what it means. So, I want to take the example of, first of all, the way these two guys, they're talking about the issues they've had in their marriages, which is to be expected. I mean, they are fully dedicated to their occupation, and they speak of how they go into they have tours, and then they come back home and they spend very little time with their family, their spouses, whatever, and then they have to leave again. They're mostly away. I mean, why would you get yourself into a relationship if that's the case? Well, that's what happens to all of us when we're younger. We're young and dumb, okay? And we don't have that self-awareness. We need to learn, we need to make mistakes in order to realize these things. It happens to all of us. But the thing is that one of the things that one of them or both of them said was that when they were going back home, they weren't really fully in the relationship because they still had to train and prepare to leave again. And so they talk about compartmentalization. But to me, that's not compartmentalization from my perspective, because, that's the way that I think. For me, what they're describing is absolute lack of engagement. Okay, it's not compartmentalization. They do not participate in the marriage at all. And listen, no judgment, that's just the way it is. These guys, they have, a strong sense of purpose and motivation and complete dedication to what they do. I mean, we've talked about that here a lot anyway. The question here is, I like to pay attention to words because words mean something. So it's not compartmentalization, it's lack of participation in the partnership. That's my opinion. That's what these guys were describing, okay? Especially in the early years and what was happening. So participation in the partnership, that's a huge aspect of I'm talking about marriage, okay? True relationship is a partnership, okay? So that's what we're talking about here. So you need to participate, and you need to participate as individuals, okay? But I think it was DJ who was saying, talking about the military wives and people women who understand that culture, they understand that they're on their own. You're completely on your own. This is so of the hero archetype, to say you're on your own because I'm on my own because I want to do what I want. And this is a negative side of the hero. It's a necessary phase of the hero archetype to have to go through a phase where you have to go solo. And if you don't want to follow me, get out of my way. That is very much of the hero archetype. This is the most selfish, so to speak, expression of the hero. And it is a necessary phase, because it is the phase where we have to do things our way. We have to follow our instinct to do what really motivates us, and we're going to discover our capacities and who we are. But listen, life has a way to always bring us back to a place where we need to evolve. That's what happens all the time. And one of the examples is when these guys have to transition, they have to change their life, and they're going to have to go into new beginnings, a new chapter, reinvent themselves. And it can be really, really difficult for them, as per their testimony. And one of the things that I talk about a lot is about self-awareness, how these guys are really trained in self-awareness. And that for me, when I like to look at, interviews when they talk about difficulties of transition, it's a very interesting subject. I feel that for them, because they're so strong, they're so capable, they also go into, a lot of emotional and mental issues, because they're very self-aware. And so suddenly they're facing, first of all, they have to leave a world that they love. I'm talking about special forces. Again, very different. Special forces from regular military. Why? Because special forces, they are doing what they want and what they love. In order to be there, to get there, you're weeded out. And boy, if you don't have the motivation, okay, you're not going to get there. So these people, they are where they are, and they're doing what they want. It's very important. So that's why I focus on these guys specifically. So they have to leave a life that they love, that they're used to, and now they have to start a new life. So the component of leaving something behind, that belongs to an archetype. It's a whole process that belongs to the dreamer archetype. I'll have to go into that one day. But right now I want to talk about relationships. And now they have to start something new. And suddenly you would think, for us normal people, we look at these guys and we're like, dude, what are you afraid of? You're like superhuman, right? Well, we all have our insecurities. We all go through stuff. We're all human beings. And these guys, because of their self-awareness, they're very aware of their strengths and their weaknesses. So they can't lie to themselves. These guys are just straight. They don't want bullshit. They don't work in the bullshit world. They see things for what they are. And so suddenly they find themselves in territory that is not familiar, a new life that they have to build. And they're like, what the hell? And more importantly, and this, I'm going to go back to mention something from the interview. I don't think I can play a video. That's why I'm not playing it. YouTube shit. So anyway, at some point, the host they were talking about Afghanistan and anyway, a context. And So the host asks them, have you ever been in a situation, where you have to deal with these guys and you have to bribe them? And I loved that moment. It was very funny to me. Both DJ and Cole, they look at him, and I think DJ is the one who replied and said, listen, by the time we get there, there's no negotiation. I don't think he said that word, but we're not there for negotiation, okay? We're there to do what we have to do, which is to take strong action. I thought it was very funny. It was hilarious for me. It's like, now, these are not for negotiation, but that's a key word here where we're talking about, we're talking about partnership, negotiation. That's not what they're made for. Now, it's not 100% true because they do have to deal with others in their group and things like that. But it's a little different because hyper individuality and self reliance is, of the utmost importance for special forces. That's what they are. They are hyper individuals, and they work together in unison to do some missions. I'm not going to go into more details because I have no idea, but that's the concept. So there is some dynamics of relating to others, of course. But when they go back home, which is the same when they have to go into the transition to the special world that they're in, back to the ordinary world, how very of the hero's journey, right? Okay, so they go back home, or they go now in transition, and they're gonna have to face the world. I was watching these two during the interview. They do not look very comfortable doing that kind of stuff. They even express how uncomfortable it is for them, to give an interview, but they have their business, they have to start their new life. And so, they have to do what we all have to do. You have to deal with the world. You have to relate to the world. You have to be in relationships. Okay, so you're going to have to deal with that. And I can imagine that it's a lot more difficult to be in the world and have to actually learn the rules of human relations. Because here's the difference. When I say before, they do have situations of relationship, they have to relate to, their teammates. But it's not the same kind of stuff, because any issue that is happening in the group is going to be resolved in direct form, and probably with some kind of brute force, okay? We're talking about, this is the culture there. So they're going to resolve problems in the same manner that they do everything else. That's who they are. So if they have an issue with someone, they're just gonna go and tell them and things like that. That is not the dynamic of relationships from a social point of view, which is what partnership is really about. Because the attitude in that kind of relationship, true partnership, is that you have to have a consideration for the other. You have to see others for who they are. Another big issue, this is an issue we all have in relationships, right? That we enter relationships or partnership without knowing who we are, but also without seeing who the other is, okay? Yours truly and many others. So you have to see others for who they are. You have to be complete as a human being. Well, that's not who we are. When we're young and we enter a relationship, we have no idea who we are, okay? Most of us. So that's already a lot of issues. And then you have to figure out, what is the compatibility, the nature of the relationship. What is it about this relationship that should, put us together? That's an important aspect of the relationship or the partnership. So these guys, they, what they do is hero energy, straight action, elimination, brute force. They resolve issues in that manner, and it's all about expenditure of energy. Relationship is a whole other world, and it requires tact, diplomacy, a sense of harmony, and oh boy, does that make you work. So I love, when they give the example of they were talking about the poppy fields in Afghanistan, the drug networks and things like that, and how there have a lot of fields with drugs, and that's how they make their money over there. The Afghans and the terrorists and things like that. And that's when the host was asking, hey, have you had to go through these places and have to bribe someone? And they were like, no, dude, when we get there, it's not to negotiate. So I love that example. It made me laugh a lot. But that's what I wanted to talk about, how we need to understand that relationships are a huge subject. I mean, a lot of us know that. Okay, most people know that. But the intricacies of how, for all kinds of dynamics, we have dynamics of the hero, that's the loner, the individual, the dynamics of pushing yourself to discover yourself. You have dynamics of family, you have dynamics of partnerships, okay, and then you have dynamics of how to be an authority in the world, which has its own dynamics. So dynamics of relationships, we really have to switch. We have to understand how that works. We can't just go out into the world and just resolve everything by brute force. I mean, imagine if you're a guy like that, imagine that they would come back to the world and they would say, well, let me resolve every problem, by shooting everyone. Well, fortunately, they're very trained, so they usually don't do that because they have tamed their masculine energy. But this is the thing. In relationships, you have to have another kind of mindset. Now you have to look at the other. Now you have to move forward to meet the other halfway. You have to negotiate, compromise, or whatever. It's a lot bigger than that because it feels sometimes like you have to give up. Well, it depends. I mean, if you take a step back and look at relationships in terms of, okay, who am I as an individual? What is my mission in life? And do I see the other for who they are? Maybe now the meeting can be more right than in other occasions when you don't know who you are, you meet the other, you see things that are not there, and you fall into a trap, typical of relationships. So anyway, that is the archetype of relationships here. I love that interview. I recommend it. Sometimes the hosts talked a little too much, but it's worth listening to these guys who look extremely uncomfortable. But I love to see an example, it's just, I mean, I've said it before, but it baffles me that these guys who are so capable, they suddenly find themselves in a situation where they feel, so vulnerable and insecure. And listen, that's life. And that's what I love about life, that in the end, we're all the same. And boy, do we go through the same stuff. So anyway, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.